Soumya, is it being live streamed?
Just a second, it's going live. We're ready now.
Thank you. I'm so sorry again. My sincere apologies.
We are live.
Great. I'm so sorry for the interruption. There was a technical glitch. Let me begin fresh with the panel, with the introduction to the panel. I am excited to welcome you again to the panel discussions on elections in Nepal. I'm Anubha Anushree, the moderator of the event today. And as I mentioned, this event is being live streamed, and we thank you for tuning in. This panel is organized by the Review of Democracy, Central European University, Hungary. And it is being live streamed on the Review of Democracy's YouTube channel. And I encourage you to use the chat function to drop your comments/questions at any time during our chat. Please check out our other content on our web portal, revdem.ceu.edu. That is revdem.ceu.edu. Before we begin the discussion, I'd like to thank my team of assistant editors as well as the team at the Review of Democracy whom have made this event possible. A big shout out to also the panelists for agreeing to come and join us for this discussion on such a short notice. I wanted to start off by expressing our concern and distress at the escalating war in West Asia and the loss of innocent lives in the ongoing conflict. Like I mentioned, our event today is organized around the upcoming elections on March 5th in Nepal. We are going to discuss how Nepal's particular history, its electoral politics, and the protests have been and the kind of influences these sort of histories would have in the upcoming elections in the country. Sandwiched between two big countries, India and China, Nepal's politics has seen a tumultuous past few months with a very big youth protest erupting in September 2025. We did a panel on youth activism, youth movements in South Asia a couple of months ago that included some scholars and activists from Nepal. I encourage you to check it out on our YouTube portal. Before we turn to our experts, for the benefit of our audience unfamiliar with Nepal's politics, let me give a very quick indicative overview of Nepali politics over the last few decades. Modern Nepali politics has revolved around three main forces: the monarchy, the parliamentary parties, and the people's movements. Tensions between these actors has shaped the country's political path. In 1990, Nepal witnessed what is called as Jan Andolan, or the people's movements. It was the first people's movement, so it's called Jan Andolan 1, and it was directed against the autocratic monarchy-established panchayat system. Political parties like the Nepali Congress and the left forces led these protests. The result was very significant. Multi-party democracy was restored. The monarchy became constitutional, but still there was a lot of political instability. Governments changed very frequently. In 1996, the Maoist insurgency began, which lasted for about a decade. There was a violent civil war in the country between the state and the Maoist rebels. In 2001, the royal massacre shocked the country, and King Gyanendra later took direct control in 2005. This led to Jan Andolan 2 in 2006. Mass protests forced the king to restore the parliament. Soon after, the Comprehensive Peace Accord was signed. The civil war formally ended. In 2008, elections were held for a constituent assembly. The Maoists emerged as the largest party, and Nepal abolished the monarchy. It declared itself as a federal democratic republic. Ram Baran Yadav became the first president, and Pushpa Kamal Dahal, also known as Prachanda, became the first prime minister of the of the Democratic Republic. But again, as in the past, politics remained unstable, and there were many coalition governments in quick succession. Parties struggled to agree on a constitution. After the 2015 earthquake in April, political leaders were literally jolted into action, and the constitution was passed in September 2015. Uh, However, there were protests again, and this was majorly from the Terai region, and many Madhesi groups at that time felt excluded from the constitution-making process. Since 2015, Nepal has seen frequent changes in the government. Power has rotated mainly between the Nepali Congress and the different communist parties. In September 2025, a nationwide protest erupted, primarily led by the Gen Z youth demanding government accountability for the social media ban and the end to corruption. The protests resulted in the death of at least 72 people and over 2,100 injuries. The unrest led to the resignation of the Prime Minister Oli and the Chief Justice and Sushila Karki, the Chief Justice at that time, was appointed as the first female Prime Minister of the country. So two things stand out, and there are different sort of like interpretations of this long, very excerpted history that I have outlined before you. But and these two things that sort of like stand out for me are the importance of coalition politics in Nepal and how prime ministers have changed multiple times, and yet similar party structures remain in place. And the second is the role of popular movements, that popular mobilization plays a very critical role. It returns continuously in Nepali politics. And so Nepali politics has been shaped, like I said before, the monarchy, the political parties, and the powerful people's movements. So with that, let me now quickly turn to the experts and introduce them. We are joined today by four very well-known experts. The first is Dr. Pranaya Rana, is a scholar practitioner with 2 decades of experience in diverse fields, including military education, social services, and public health. He completed his PhD in international conflict management from Kinshaw State University in 2016, where he taught as an assistant professor until 2018. He's a lifetime senior Bosselman UNESCO Fellow. While in the US, he worked in public health and social services, serving vulnerable populations such as the refugees, LGBTQ, and other minority groups. Since his return to Nepal, he has been actively engaged in academic empowerment and socio-political activities. He's currently a full-time politician who contested in the 2020 House of Representative elections and served as a senior advisor to the Government of Nepal Ministry of Youth and Sports in 2024. Welcome, Dr. Rana, to the panel.
Thank you so much.
Great. So Professor Dr. Rana is followed by Ishika Panta. Panta is a social entrepreneur and a policy advocate from Nepal, and the founder and chairperson of Project Abhaya, a youth-led initiative advancing gender-inclusive political literacy, civic education, and leadership development across Nepal. Under her leadership, the organization has reached over 5,500 women across 57 districts. That's actually quite an amazing feat, Ishika. And Ishika has also served as a lead curator of TEDx Mighty Ghar for 4 years and has represented Nepal at international forums, including the Cow Forum in Switzerland and the Skull World Forum in the UK. She is an alumni of the executive program in public narrative at Harvard Kennedy School. Welcome, Ishika.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Ishika is followed by Nabin Giri. He's a youth engagement practitioner and sustainability advocate dedicated to empowering young people and advancing inclusive development. He works in research and innovation at Professional Holdings Limited and is pursuing an MBA at Global College International affiliated with Midwest University, Nepal. As a cohort member of the US Embassy Youth Council Nepal 2025, he promotes youth participation and civic leadership, and I'm sure you have a lot to talk about. Youth representation. He has represented Nepal at international forums in Greece, Romania, and Thailand, receiving the Young Achievers Award 2024, and continues to champion youth-led innovation and sustainability. Giri, Nabin Ji, welcome to the event today.
Thank you so much, Anushree. Thank you for having me.
Are you a doctor or no? Do I have the liberty to call you a doctor, or are you
No,
still
ma'am,
getting
no.
it? Okay. Welcome to the event, Nabin. Sumikshya Khadka is a feminist development practitioner. She's an entrepreneur and counselor with over a decade of experience from grassroots community mobilization to global advocacy on equality, justice, and sustainability. Currently, she's working as a project manager at Hami Daju Y, focusing on engaging men for gender equality. This is really a lofty ideal, Sumikshya. She brings expertise in public advocacy, research, capacity building, and community engagement across agendas, including good governance, disaster risk reduction, ending child marriage, civic participation, gender justice, and eliminating GBV and harmful social practices. She also brings academic insights from psychology into advancing social change. So with that, I would quickly like to turn to a brief video that was prepared by our assistant editors on Nepal protests, and I thought that would be entertaining for our panelists to revisit, as well as our audience to watch. Please, Soumya, can we turn to the collage?
देशको रक्षा गर्ने जति सबै सुकिया छन् नेता जति सबै चोर देश लुटिका छन् आमाको साडीमा कटु सोची मुतिरा छन् खाने बेला गर्ने बेला फुटिरा छन् नाङ्ग्रेस नेवाले नाउँबादी सबै मिली घुमी देश खाउँ बाडी हामी सधैँ चिले फुकी जस्तो केस निबिगारी सस्तो साडी महँगो गाडी कानुन कायदालाई नाङ्गो बाङ्गो पारिँदै उगारी नारीमा कुमारी जोगाउने बलात्कारी खाडीमा चिनारी लुटाउने सधैँ हामी बाडीमा बिरामी फुकाउने त्यही बानी देशको कर्मचारी शक्तिशाली सरकारी 30,000 को तलब 30 वटा घर पारी 20 बजारको सडक 20 वटा खाल्डो पारी खल्ती भारी बैंकमा रिसा तहको अधिकारी कसले तिर्ने 7 समुद्र पारी त्यसको 7 उधारी
So thank you, Soumya. So this is just for the context. This is a song which was recorded about 6 years ago by Valendra Shah is one of the contestants, one of the front runners actually of the upcoming elections. This song is called Balidan, and it directly critiques. It became a very popular song, and it critiqued the corruption, the lack of accountability in the Nepali administration during the protests. So we'll begin first. I know, Ishika, you don't have as much time. So let me quickly turn actually to you a little bit, upturning the event sequence. So Ishika, let me turn to you first, and please go ahead, take the floor. Tell us what are the major sort of like themes that we are looking at in the upcoming elections.
Thank you so much to the Review of Democracy and Dr. Anubha Anushree for bringing us together. It's such a privilege and good to be in this conversation at a time when Nepal feels politically restless, but also alert at the same time. I want to start with something that I keep returning to in my own work. Nepal has, we don't have a participation problem, but I think the problem right now we have after the Gen Z movement is a trust problem. And if you look at the history in 2022, the federal elections, the turnout was about 61%. young people showed up then as well. They voted, but at the same time, we could feel the frustration then as well. And we could also see the coalition governments changing very quickly. And the leaders, when we see right now, they've been switching alliances, and the public commitments that they have made that really do not translate into implementation. And I think that's what scourged the young generation right now. And that's what really made the Gen Z movement, the frustration, the anger, the fight for accountability and transparency. That's how the Gen Z movement started. When my work with Project Abhay, as you mentioned, the organization that we've been currently operating across 57 districts in Nepal, we started with designing programs before actually implementing them. And while we were designing the programs, we ran baseline surveys in different municipalities. And what we could figure out then was that most of the participants could name their mayor, or they could actually talk about who are the current candidates, but they could not actually explain how the municipal budget is drafted or what is the implementation procedure, who's taking care after the budget, or who is taking care after the execution of the given policies there. And there was a struggle to differentiate between federal, provincial, and local responsibilities under the Constitution as well. And most of the young people, they believed that real decisions that was supposed to happen, it happened informally inside party circles and not actually through procedures. So this was the gap that we identified while working. And when I try to connect the dots after the Gen Z movement, we actually see the general frustration coming back to specific questioning. And I believe that's the political maturity that we have been able to gain. After the Gen Z movement, the dialogues that we had with regard to women's representation in politics right now, which is historically low, it's only 11%. And that too, women have been placed in spaces where they're likely unable to win. They've been positioned that way. So we can see the participation is very tokenistic and symbolic. And we worked on certain themes then, and we talked about equality in politics, and also how do we have a clean leadership for future, which we have election in like 2 days. So we talked about this. And while we were having these dialogues as well, I learned that most of the young people are not anti-politics, which we see on social media right now. But I realized that people are anti-opacity right now. And as we were approaching the elections, I think the major 3 uncomfortable questions that we need to ask every person, is that our political party is willing to democratize internally. Yes, we have witnessed some certain changes within some political parties, but not just with regard to youth wings, but through actual decision-making rules, or let alone transparent ticket distribution itself with financial clarity. And also we're unsure about how can Parliament function as a site of oversight rather than just party alignment. I think this is another question that's been hovering around with many people, because we've not been able to see the committee strength or evidence-based debate matter. It's just campaign slogans right now as well. And third is, after the entire protest, after the 76 lives that we've lost on September 23 and 24, how do we channel the protest energy to institutional reform that allows us to make a framework, so that if that's been created right now, we could actually institutionalize it and create it as a watchdog mechanism as well. The protest reveals certain pressure point, of course, but unless there are pathways for that energy to enter formal politics, often we talk about capacity building, and often we also have many trainings for workshops during the time of elections. But I feel like if we have the entry points, this protest was the entry point for many young people for the election as well, so that it can cycle back to delusionment. And I think these are the 3 major questions that's been sitting with me, while I'm very optimistic about the upcoming election as well. And in the districts that we've been working right now, once young citizens understand the procedures and they're language changes with regard to how they see politics as. They don't often talk about politics as a dirty game, or let alone say the system is broken, but they start asking very intellectual questions, I would say, as which is the particular committee that approved this budget. And I think that's the kind of change that we've been able to see after the protest. And that's a different kind of politics that we've been able to witness right now. And for me, particularly and personally, it's the 2026 elections, which is happening in 2 days, are not only about who forms the next coalition or anything beyond that, but also how can institutional actually grow up now? And if we continue on rotating the same existing leaders without strengthening their rules or without holding them accountable, trust is still going to remain very fragile right now. And we've still not been able to reconcile very properly after the entire movement. But if this election cycle opens space for procedural reforms, transparency, and also genuine youth authority, I believe it could mark a quieter but more meaningful consolidation of democracy, of course. And that, I think, is the real test before us right now. And yeah, I think that's it from my end for now.
Thank you. Thank you for that very comprehensive, but also very, I guess, thought-provoking sort of 3 questions that you laid out. That was very thought-provoking. And I was also struck by the term that you used, anti-opacity. And I'm sure I'll have more time to ask you about what you meant by that term and describe that term in greater detail. But I'm aware that transparency remains a major concern in Nepal, just as in much of South Asia. Let me quickly turn to Dr. Rana, and I'd like him to segue towards what does he think are the major themes of this upcoming elections. I know Ishika's already talked about transparency. It's a major theme, especially post-protest period, when accountability and transparency really seem to be sort of the theme that's being addressed by all political parties. I wanted to know from you how effective have political parties been in addressing this theme at all, and how has the election process been so far in trying to address transparency and trust within their own political structures. So let me turn to you, Dr. Rana.
Thank you so much. So adding on to what Ishika has already mentioned, the general themes that I see today is a great confusion amongst the Nepali population as to who they should trust, to form the government that is going to take Nepal out of this constitutional crisis. Nepal is in a very fragile national security state. The political parties and the security forces of Nepal have not been able to convey the national security situation to the public as well as they should have been able to. If you look at the recent developments that happened in the last week, the recent BBC report has also sparked a great controversy. While it is definitely a thorough documentary, many have commented that it shows a one-sided story. It does not show the instances of infiltration of violent forces, including the engagement of the TOB group, which is Tibetan origin blood. It does not pinpoint directly at the forces behind the destruction of national landmarks. It does not show the jailbreak of national level leaders together with thousands of criminals across Nepal. Right. So those things were missing from a very reputed agency's documentary. It has sparked a huge controversy. The other controversy that's taking place at the moment is the Karki Commission, which was responsible to report on the details of the Gen Z movement. Their report has been postponed by the government, right? So this has sparked another controversy because many people, many citizens, Nepali citizens and experts assume that had that report been out, a lot of people contesting in the elections from either old or the new parties would be disqualified. They're the same people who've been engaged in burning of the Prime Minister's office or the Supreme Court and such. So why was the Karki Commission's report postponed is a big question mark that has been, creating more confusion over the election process. There is the government of Nepal, the current government of Nepal, I wish would have been out of controversy, but unfortunately, that is not the case. And I would like to make a small correction for what you had stated in the at the very beginning of this the panel. Susila Karki was a former Supreme Justice of Nepal. She was not the Supreme Justice at the time of the revolution. So the so-called people's government, or say, this was supposed to be a non-politically affiliated group's government. But very soon, a very prominent figure in the cabinet, Mr. Kulman Gising, he was found to have opened his own party, the Ujala Nepal, and two other ministers, Bablu Gupta and Jagadish Kharel, they joined the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, which has been led by Ravi Lamichhane. The person who, again, was who has been alleged of jailbreak during the movement. So there is, there are two sides of the story. One side says people have their constitutional rights. Everybody has their own thing going on. So why deprive those people of contesting in the elections, while the other side is saying those people were supposed to be in an interim government whose responsibility was to conduct the elections. So they were not supposed to leave the government and contest the elections at such a crucial period. So the government has been alleged of favoring one versus the other. Right? So that is a huge mess, in my opinion. And a lot of social media engagement has been further confusing the voters of Nepal. How you are talking about the young versus the old narrative, but then there is a very significant population that is talking about young versus the qualified. It's not about just being young. It is about being able to draft policies, being able to find gaps in policies, right? But what we have identified or what we have seen in the recent few weeks is even the ones who actively participated in the revolution, the so-called new parties have not been able to give us the candidates who would fulfill the norms of the Gen Z revolution. We have seen a lot of populist figures. We have seen a lot of viral figures, but not as much of qualified figures. Right? Recently, only today, one of the Rashtriya Swatantra Party's candidacy was revoked in Dhanusa 1, because of the person's engagement in financial fraudery or something. So these are the challenges amidst which Nepali voters are going to vote in 2 days' time. So lots of confusion, transparency and accountability questions, not just targeted at political parties, but at the interim government itself for its role. While the sentiment was very anti-old establishment, right after the Gen Z revolution, there was a huge demand for political parties to reform themselves, and attempts were made. I think Ishika tried to shed some light on that earlier, and I would like to add a little bit more. So political parties and their organizations kind of also stood on that narrative and stood for reformation. The United Marxist Leninists, UML, party conducted their their special convention. However, they could not reform themselves. So even after the convention, the old establishment still continued in the leadership of the party and other major posts. Rashtriya Swatantra Party, the new party where Balin and Ravi Lamichhane have joined hands together, they postponed their general convention until after the elections. The only party that I think to some extent reformed themselves, or say took a first step into reformation, was Nepali Congress, which was able to oust its old establishment and most of the leaders who were charged of corruption and who were charged of anti-democratic values, sentiments. So they were able to oust all of them and reform themselves a bit. So what I'm trying to say is even the older establishments and their organizations have tried to reform themselves. Some succeeded, some did not. That's all right. It's a democratic process. But, a lot was expected of the new parties or the new party. And people a little bit confused as to why that didn't happen in the so-called new party. And especially the recent results in Bangladesh and Thailand, very recently, has shocked public opinion, because similar narrative of youth movement and the new parties taking over the government was on the high in those places, but the election results did not come as such. So we are now at the very last moments of the elections and hoping for the best, and hoping that the people of Nepal choose right people, qualified people who will be able to draft policies to be able to take Nepal out of this crisis. So that would be all from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you for this very insightful remarks, Dr. Rana. This was very helpful to lay the land for us. And I was quite struck by how these great parallels across various South Asian countries. So also thank you for sort of indicating the connections between other parts of South Asia, Southeast Asia, and what's happening in Nepal. I think these are very interrelated sort of movements that are happening across the world. And probably 5 years down the line, when we look at this moment, we'll see it in a different light. This is also a great segue to Nabin, who works on youth participation. Popularity has become a very crucial, especially viral popularity, as Dr. Rana called it. Viral popularity has become a very strong qualifying point for candidates today, not just in Nepal, but across Bangladesh, Thailand, Indonesia, India. So Nabin, take us to what's going on. What do you think are some of the crucial contexts and sort of triggers for youth participation in this election? What does it look like? Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Anushree. Thank you to Central European University and Review of Democracy for creating this important democratic space for the reflection and dialogue. This is me, Nabin Giri, and I'm working in the youth engagement and civic civilization mobilization in Nepal. And I have been working closely involved in organizing youth networks and grassroots initiatives across the Nepal. So, as I speak to you today, Nepal stands at significant democratic movement. The day after tomorrow, we go to the polls. The country is prepared, institutions are set, citizens are ready to vote. But this election cannot be understood in isolation. It comes after a period of intense public engagement, particularly from the young people. When we talk about Nepal, 2026 elections, we cannot separate them from the recent Gen Z protests that reshaped our political atmosphere. And we cannot talk about those protests without talking about the youths. Nepal is a very young nation. Every year, hundreds of thousands of Nepalese people, youths enter the labor market. Yet, youth unemployment and underemployment remains significantly higher than the national average. Thousands continue to leave the country for foreign employment and in search of the opportunity. This is not only an economic issue. It's a political issue. Young people are not protesting because they reject democracy, as already Ishika mentioned. On the contrary, they deeply engaged. They are protesting because they want democracy to function better, with greater transparency, stronger accountability, and more consistent delivery. The core concerns raised during the protest were corruption and accountability. Young citizens questioned why public resources are misused, why coalition governments change frequently, and why political commitments often fail to translate into structural reform. This signals that young citizens are politically aware and willing to engage, but they often feel disconnected from formal institutions of power. Despite constitutional commitment to inclusion, youth remain underrepresented in parliament and in senior decision-making process. Political parties mobilizes young people during the elections, but leadership pathways remain narrow. During the protest, we also witnessed tragedy. Young lives were lost, emotions run high, there were unrest and damage to public property. These moments were painful for the nation. In response, a new government was formed within the responsibility to restore stability and lead the country toward fresh elections that the process is culminating. Uh, One encouraging development is that political parties under public pressure have shown greater attention to internal debate, issue-based campaigning, and accountability. Some protest demands have entered mainstream political discourse. That is a healthy democratic sign. Now, as we approach voting day, the central question becomes: will this election reflect these aspirations of new generation? First time and second time voters could influence outcomes in many constituencies. If political actors respond meaningfully to youth priorities, employment generation, education reform, digital governments, climate resilience, this election could strengthen democratic legitimacy. Nepal's constitution guarantees inclusion, including a requirement that women constitute at least one-third of parliament. This represents meaningful institutional progress. Yet, representation alone is not empowerment. Young women and marginal youth continue to face financial barriers, nomination biases, social discrimination, and limited access to political networks. Ensuring this inclusion translates into real influence remaining an ongoing challenge. Perhaps the most important issue heading into this election is trust. Frequent coalition changes have affected policy continuity. Citizens often experience instability more directly than reform. For young people, this translates into uncertainty about unemployment, governance, and long-term national direction. We are prepared. The electoral process is moving forward. Citizens are ready to exercise the democratic right. This election is not only about which party will form the government, it is about whether democratic institutions can respond to citizen pressure in constructive ways. Nepal history shows that public movements have often pushed democratic revolution. The deeper question now is whether that energy can be absorbed institutionally through stronger governance, improved accountability, and greater youth inclusion. Young people are not asking for symbolic roles, they are asking to be partners in shaping the country's futures. They want opportunities at home, they want transparency, they want fair political access, and they want democracy to listen not only during elections but between them. As Nepal prepares to vote, the hope is not simply for a new government, but for renewed democratic confidence. Thank you. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Nabin, for that very insightful comment and I'd say very coherent comment. I wanted us to talk more deeply about the heterogeneity of youth experiences in Nepal, and we'll probably get to that during the Q&A during our discussion. I believe that the term Gen Z mislabels young people and the variety of disconnects that they have experienced, not just in Nepal, but across, I guess, the South Asia. But before we do that, let me turn to Sumikshya. Sumikshya, please tell us what do you think are some of the major themes and concerns in the upcoming elections, especially through the lens of gender, through the lens of violence, and the kind of distrust, especially the women participants in this electoral process encounter. Sumikshya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So let me first begin with the gratitude. Thank you, organizers, for this space at this critical hour. So we are standing at the threshold of a new era, and we are demanding a leadership that delivers the change and justice we've been patiently waiting for. And I would like to pick on what Pranaya sir just said. He said that we hope that the people will vote for the right candidate. But you see, as he also mentioned, that the most alarming aspect of this election is the continued failure to release the investigation report led by Mr. Gaurik Bahadur Karki. And this pattern is not new. As Anubha previously said, that we have had series of protests and movements throughout Nepalese history. We saw that in 1990 and in 2005 and 6 and 2015 and 16. And in these periods, commissions were formed under similar circumstances, and the commission reports were never made public, and those who had to be held responsible and accountable were never made accountable. So what will happen if similar trend continues with the Gen Z uprising as well? And we know the protest was infiltrated. What was supposed to be a peaceful protest was infiltrated through various forces conversing together, and still many questions remain unanswered. So who committed the crimes, who infiltrated the peaceful movements? And the destruction was not within Kathmandu, it was nationwide destruction spread within a period of 2 days. So how did that happen? How did the prisoners escape? So all these critical questions remain unanswered, and now the people who were engaged in the protest who were overthrown during the protest, both are now in the elections, raising their candidacies. So I guess that is the most alarming issue that we have to address, and that's bugging us right now. And some of the other issues that Ishika ji has also mentioned, for example, the concern is the registration turnout paradox. So when we look at the voter list of our general election that is being held in March 5, so women constitute over 51% of the total Nepalese population, but they remain a minority on the voter rolls, just at 48%. And the disturbing fact is that instead of narrowing, this gap between the population and the registration voters have actually widened compared to the past. So and if we look at the cases in India, we have seen that changes has unfolded over time. And now into 2019's general elections of India, the women's participation rose higher than men. So we can say that gender inequality in the election is not inevitable. It responds to policy, to persistence and political will. And it's existing because of the lack of the political will and because of the deeply seated patriarchal notions that's existing within the political parties. And if we also refer to the first past the post candidates, as Ishika ji mentioned, there's just 11%. So this is neither a coincidence, it's not the lack of the potential women leaders in Nepal. So it is the reflections of the deeply rooted bias within our male-dominated parties. And I guess we can say that parties nominate fewer women for competitive seats, often due to the implicit biases. And it's not because women are less electable, because the selection criteria are inherently male-dominated. They are prepared by male and they favor male. So, yeah, these are some of the issues. And when it comes to casting the vote, we can say that women, they have more challenges, and there is more gender gap. We can say that, you know, women does not when a woman does not control her own income, she cannot control her vote. So in case of Nepal, there are many women who have not been able to be financially dependent. Most of the women are engaged in the unpaid and unrecognized labor, and surviving in the double burden, which is not just a weight for them to carry, but a barrier that is reinforcing the silence. So for a woman to go and cast for a vote, especially in the rural areas, sometimes they cannot even go to the voting pool without being accompanied by a male members. So these are the real practical challenges that are on the ground. So before the elections, we did work with election officers and observers to ensure compliances within the gender code of conduct, and to ensure that there are gender responsive indicators within the indicators that they're observing during the elections. So we can say some activities have been done to ensure that the elections are gender friendly and the women's issues are raised, but still large gap exists to persist that. Oh, I'm just realized my video is not on. I guess the
Yes, I
laptop.
wondered whether that was because you did not have enough bandwidth or something, so I did not interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, my laptop is not working, so I'm not being able to pause it. No, it's working, I guess.
Wonderful. Good to see your face.
Yeah. So, so even if we look at the history, I think I would like to refer to an old Nepali proverb that says "Akasko fal आँखा तरी मर." And in English, it describes a fruit hanging so high in the sky that one can only stare at it in longing. And for decades, this true executive political power for women has been that fruit in the sky. So we're told that the window is open, but when we try to open that window, we find ourselves staring at another another wall blocking the window. So the gender gap persists. The efforts have been made. And I guess amid all the chaos and all the struggles, we can say that hope exists for us, especially with the election. The best thing about this election is hope. And that's all I'd like to add now. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Sumikshya. That's a very optimistic note that you conclude on. I'm not so optimistic as many of our panelists don't seem to be. But yeah, let me turn to all the other panelists. And I know, Ishika, you are short on time, so let me just pose this question to you directly. And I wanted to return to the term that you used, anti-opacity, and you talked about how there's a lack of trust, popular distrust, if you like, in Nepal. And many would argue that the very political processes, the hybrid electoral mechanism, the interim government, the coalition politics, etc., that itself has undermined accountability in a kind of democratic government. And I wanted to probe, and as Dr. Rana was talking, I was reminded of how the Karki Commission has waived off the cases of money laundering on the RSP chief, Ravi Lamishani, and how the government has also sidestepped laying any accountability on the Oli government for some of the excesses during the protests. So how do we think about what do we understand by trust, restoring trust, strengthening trust in a system where I feel fundamentally it is structured against making more and more people participate in a transparent way, in a democratic way in the government. What are some of the measures? Do you think this trust could come from political parties, reforming the political parties internally? Do you think the trust factor could be further strengthened through specific reforms that the administration, electoral reforms that the administration could introduce? Or do you think civil society, which has been a very prominent member and participant in electoral and democratic processes in Nepal, they could do something to make trust a very important issue, not just in this election, but in the formation of the government? Yeah. So that's my broader question to all the participants, but let us begin with Ishika, you.
I think there was a whole lot of questions out there, and I would just like to superficially touch base on each of it. And the first question, the anti-opacity, when I said that, I meant that we have a narrative right now. After the Gen Z movement, the narrative, what Nepal had was we were against the social media ban. So that's how we did the protest. But eventually, people realized that it was not against the social media ban, but it was against, it was our fight for accountability and transparency. And what I mean by anti-opacity right now is, in very plainly, that young people are not against politics and we're not against things being hidden. And what opacity in politics should look like is that how were the tickets being distributed within the parties right now? Because we see some people who are like business entrepreneurs who've been receiving tickets, and also the proportionate representation system, which is in Nepal, how the members have been placed there, because that place was allocated for a historically marginalized group. But if we see at the candidates list right now, which the party we've been talking about a lot, Rashtriya Swatantra Party, RSP, when we look at the list, we are unsure of how the list was made. And I think the opacity, when I say that, I mean by the transparency here, and also how the budgets has been executed right now. We hear some women candidates being saying out in social media that they've not been receiving any fundings or help from the party. They've just been given tickets, and there's no communication after that itself as well. So I think that's what I talk about, opacity, not about not explaining, but how the system functions actually. And the accountability thing that you mentioned about the Karki Commission report, personally, I feel if the report is out, and after what Dr. Pranaya also mentioned, that we will not be able to have elections if the reports were out immediately, because there are different entities involved, and we've just been able to look at the surfaces right now. And so I believe that's why the report is not out yet. But that was one of the key promises that the interim government promised us when our former Chief Justice and current Prime Minister took her oath. That was one of the key priority areas that she promised us. And we are a little disheartened with that. But we also see the strength that she's been able to pull with regard to how she's wanting to pull out the election this time. And also with 4 ministers running away from the cabinet position. When we talk about accountability right now, in the early after the September, we were very serious, and we were very key watchdogs right there. But right now, when we see the 4 ministers running their ways, making space for their candidacy in the election, I think that's the first step. We've failed in wanting to have accountable and transparent government. And the accountability right now is also the temporary authority. We don't have much sufficient checks there itself. And this interim government was definitely here to stabilize and administer, but not to explain the directionary power itself. So there were decisions where we were not in favor of the interim government right now, but that's still been made. And by restoring trust, what it means for me is not just in symbols or speeches alone or campaigns that they've been able to run very smoothly, but also the behavior over time that they follow. So when I say the 4 ministers example, I think we failed there itself. If we were able to give a check and balance to the interim government then and there, I think we would be able to institutionalize the framework, now a stronger framework then. And I think your questions were about trust and interim government's accountability and also anti-opacity. I hope I've answered it.
Yeah, very much so. I wanted your response on the general structure of how trust could be sort of resutured into the system.
Mm.
And before we turn to the other panelists, Dr. Rana corrects me. He mentioned that it was the Attorney General who attempted to take back the organized crimes and money laundering case in the case of RSP and not the Karki Commission. So thank you for correcting me, Dr. Rana. Please go ahead. Would you want to talk about trust and how to think about trust in a system where it's sort of like structured, organized around not thinking about popular trust or not thinking about common people's trust? Please.
Okay, so I would like to take you back a little in time, and we'll start with transitional justice, um, which was one of the biggest issue indicated in the Comprehensive Peace Accord of 2006. So we have a history of leaving footprints for the ghosts of the past. We don't address them. We just let the ghosts creep, into the future with us. So it has been over 18 years, I'd say close to 20, that the transitional justice issue has not been addressed. When the Maoists took over, they did not have the confidence, or they probably thought it was not a good idea for their party, for their organization, to charge their own people in the matters of severe crimes against humanity, right, and a serious violation of human rights. So they kept lingering the transitional justice issue, from 2006 to 2026, right? 20 years. And now we are in the verge of another system change. And if the Karki Commission's investigative report doesn't come out, then we will be leaving another ghost, before we move ahead politically. And what we have seen is that incidents like these leave our system in jeopardy, our political system in jeopardy, because the opposition will always poke on that matter, and then that'll lead to, a stalemate in the parliament, parties not being able to come to a consensus when drafting bills. And then it will be, whether it's one versus the other in opposition, these matters will always be poked at. We have seen that with MCC. When UML is in the government, they vouch for MCC, and the Congress will oppose it. And when Congress or the Maoist party goes to the government, the others will oppose it. So so these are matters of serious consideration, and that is why I think the Karki Commission's report should be taken with a huge consideration by the upcoming government, regardless of the fact that it will make over a dozen MPs disqualified.
Right.
Unfortunately, some of these people, will win the elections. They will become MPs. But my analysis is that over a dozen of these MPs will be disqualified only on the basis of Karki Commission's investigative report. Then the money laundering, the organized crime, other offenses, those will add that number further. But at least over a dozen disqualified only on the basis of Karki Commission's report. So now that brings us to the matter of trust. Who do we trust? The interim government was supposed to be a non-political entity, a people's government, with very high hopes. I agree with the other panelists that at least it did create an environment for the elections to happen, despite reservations from many parties in the early period. But the very same government under Prime Minister Susila Karki has been seen favoring one side. There are discourses going on in public as to why could not the Prime Minister stop the resignations, or not? Why couldn't she not entertain the resignations of the ministers who who are now contesting the elections? She could have clearly said, "Hey, you're supposed to do your due diligence, complete these elections, and then go your way." Those ministers, all of those ministers came through a very rigorous vetting and rating processes in Discord, organized by the same groups that are now alleged of infiltrating the Gen Z revolutions. Right. There was a huge public participation in the rating of each person's eligibility to join the cabinet. The same voice did not appear anywhere as these people were exiting the cabinet. So that,
And they were, just to clarify, Dr. Rana, they were exiting so that they could join the electoral process and become
yes, but the people who vetted them publicly and through the Discord app, polling, those voices were not, they were nowhere to be seen as these ministers were exiting the process. The huge concern of trust. Who infiltrated the peaceful Gen Z revolution? Who were the people who led those peaceful protesters towards the assembly hall? These are some of the questions that the people of Nepal were waiting, to see in the investigation reports. But it's been held. It's been held by who? The government, the interim government. You could say, it's for the sake of peaceful elections, we have to complete this process and blah, blah, blah. But hey, that is where, the matter of accountability comes in. That is where the basic values and principles of democracy comes in. Because the future costs of not releasing that report is even higher. Are you willing to take that chance just to enshrine your name somewhere to say that you have completed this process in the given deadline? So while my only optimism, or where I'm trying to stay optimistic, is that the people of Nepal who are now, more politically literate, since we have had so many elections since 2015, so just hoping that they make informed decision while voting, and that they take into account the incidents of Bangladesh, Indonesia, Thailand, and such. But the one major part of the protests and the interim government themselves have become part of this confusion creation in the recent electoral process, which makes this election not as fair in my eyes. Because we have all seen instances of Prime Minister Susila Karki's officials being engaged in coalition formation. That is conflict of interest. That is serious conflict of interest. Her advisors were in the proportional representation list in the Rashtriya Swatantra Party's list. If the ministers had to resign before leaving, before contesting, then how come the advisors are still there? as the Prime Minister's advisors, while their names were public in the proportional representation list. So a serious conflict of interest. A government that was supposed to create an environment of election, a peaceful election, has been found to be creating an environment to favor one, as I mentioned earlier, right? So while this kind of discussion may not have surfaced as much as we would like for it to come out, believe me, people are talking about these in every morning and evening tea talks in their communities. So how all of this is going to play out in voter turnout, and how all of this is going to affect the electoral results is yet to be seen. But Nepal, as we are, we just had elections in 2022 November, and everybody back then was saying there will be another election soon. There will be another. So there was a narrative that this is not going to last 5 years. There was a serious narrative that government or that election was not going to last 5 years has come true. And so, but again, we have no choice but to be optimistic and to hope that the people make informed decision and make sure that the good people win, so that regardless of party affiliation, that they choose good candidates. Again, that is a matter of another discussion as to who are the good candidates, because again, lots have been alleged of crimes. A lot of them are going to be disqualified, even if they win. So again, I want to be optimistic, but having seen how the government is functioning and having seen how the old versus and the new, all the kind of candidates that they have proposed, is going to this is not going to be an easy electoral outcome, and the country of Nepal is going to take a big electoral toll of having to conduct by-elections soon in the future. I'm sorry if I sound not too optimistic, but that is my analysis of how things are going to turn out.
Right. And I think false optimism is worse than uh, informed indifference. On that, I would turn to Nabin. Would you like to continue on this topic of trust? Yes. How do you think young people are sort of thinking about? Dr. Rana talked a lot about young people's involvement with this electoral process, the failures and the limits of that as well. So tell us what you think, young people, how are they thinking about their participation, and how do they think trust is a crucial sort of component of this election?
Thank you, Anushree. As Dr. Rana and Ishika already mentioned about the issues, like the main responsibility of this government is to conduct election, as a people's government, and another one is to investigate the issues of Gen Z movement and what was the reasons and who were the main culprits behind this people death and the destruction of the public property. The government was responsible for this, but the Karki Ayug, which is mentioned to be bring the updates to us, like the reports to us, it hasn't bring it. So it is a it is a big question to the government and the Karki Commission. But as we already know, the day after tomorrow we are having our election and we are voting for the country. The next decade or the next 5 years, we should be optimistic about the tenure of the government, that it will last for the 5 years, and we are voting for the 5 years government and the 5 years constituents. So we could be optimistic about that, but there are several questions about the issues that where and how the issues were run in our country at the moment. So this is the thing. Besides this, the accountability and trust go hand in hand. Like before gaining the trust or having the trust issues, we should mention the main thing is about accountability. So we should make the government accountable to the public, and not only the government, we should make our constituent, like our member of parliament, accountable to their constituent, that what they promised and what are the manifestos they are bring, and what are the results they are bringing to the people in the next 5 years. So accountability should be made by the people, as many peoples are already, like many youths who are not into politics also joined several political groups, as already mentioned. Like some are in the major list of the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, some are joining Nepali Congress and other several parties, so which is a good thing also. But besides that also, the youth should focus on the gaps and the deviations what they are having, and they should question within the government, within the political parties, and besides that also. So consistent citizen engagement should be made, and we should be clear about the deliver on the commitments what they are bringing. As Then other thing is like inclusive decision making, which is also the next process, and everyone should like we are hopeful for the fair governance, and we are really hopeful for the uh, right people in the right place, as the right people are coming from this election, and they will lead the country, and we are hopeful for the next 10 year. We and The unanswered questions should be answered from the report. The next government should take care of that. That's the saying of the youths of Nepal.
Great. Thank you, Nabin. I did want to remind our audience, please use the chat function to register your comments, your questions for our panelists. This is a very in-depth conversation. I'm very glad that we are having this chat here today. Sumiksha, over to you on the question of trust.
Sure, thank you so much. All the other panelists have shared great insights into this. So I want to share from a bit different lens. So this is not the first time young people have come to street against governance system, as we have already discussed that. All the moments we have talked about earlier, they were conducted with the youth power. But this time, this uprising has been named after Generation G, making it a generational war. And we have witnessed massive movements in Nepal once every decades. And the most important thing for now is we can't let the cycle continue. So I think in order to build trust, first, what we need is a thorough diagnosis of Nepal's recurring crisis cycle. Why is there the concentration of power among elites, and the instrumentalizations of youth participants rather than the institutionalization? So youth have always been used for political advantages rather than formally integrated into decision-making systems. So Generation G will be obviously get older, but what matters is the younger generations that comes after us also gets into the leadership and the decision-making systems. So we need intergenerational dialogues, we need to establish gender justice, and we need structured dialogues to build trust. And we also need to build trust between the civilians and the security forces that has been questioned by the September uprising. So I'd like to share about a young man that I met yesterday. So he participated in the Gen Z uprising, very frustrated, and he was campaigning for Rashtriya Swatantrata Party. And I was surprised because he was not a person who is affiliated with any political party. So when I asked him why he is doing so, because obviously the party itself is being questioned with his engagement in the September uprising, he said that he is engaged in campaigning for the party, not because he is trusting the party or the leaders that have been established through the party, but because working for that party gives him a hope, mostly because the new leaders are also affiliated with the parties. So campaigning for the party is giving him a hope. So in contrast to what Dr. said, I think optimism in Nepali politics right now is essential, and not just as a naive positivity, but as a democratic necessity. Because if we citizens lose hope, then obviously the voter turnouts will decrease, and then this anger will be so easier to weaponize and used in other protests. So I think we have to be optimistic, and we have to have hope, as this hope will help us be resilient and continue fighting for what's worth fighting for. And the most essential thing that we also need to have is the right to recall, which I guess we don't have in the constitutional provisions. If we had the right to recall, then we could call the elected parliamentarians to be accountable for what they did, even if the commission report comes later. But sadly, we don't have that as well. So let's see what happens. So we have our fingers crossed and very hopeful that the right leaders will come. And even if the new parties or the new old people win, they will change the leadership style to make it best for the country. That's all. Over to you.
Great. So I did want us to begin on the right note. In South Asia, you don't begin elections without really having a direct combat between panelists, and TVs are full of such debates. I'm glad, Sumiksha, you argued for optimism. But I did want to return to the issue of young people. I think this term has been used in a very homogeneous way. Nabin, your presentation made me think how different the different kinds and categories of young people. So before we turn to the audience, I just wanted to quickly touch on the role of young people in this election. Of course, this election comes after the very big protests that happened in September 2025. But I also see that, unlike Bangladesh, where youths participated in the electoral process and therefore sort of consolidated a certain tendency towards democracy, young people have not yet formed a political party. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe there's something else going on. And so I wanted to know from you guys, why did young people not form a political party? Why are they sort of continuing with traditional parties? RSP is relatively young, but still it's led by, as Dr. Pranaya Rana mentioned, older people, not necessarily qualified people. So yeah, please, why do you think young people have not yet sort of like formally participated in this process, elections, through a political party? What's going on there? Nabin, would you like to
Yeah.
to the
Okay, I'll start. So yeah, basically, Nepali youths also are like not starting their own party. They are enrolling in the old parties, as you mentioned, and it's also the practices in other places as well. So maybe the dimension slightly different from other countries in Nepal. Like they are unified in the one of the mostly not all the youths, but major youths were assembled in the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, as you mentioned earlier, and the Prime Minister candidate with the Balendra Saha also. So that's the one of the symbol we have. But yeah, the different party is not formed. Maybe it is because they are not completely uh, ready to bring a different party, because we see the example of Bangladesh, where a different party couldn't make a big impact. So creating a different party may not create a greater impact, but having a synergic energy with the same ideologies and same groups and same visions and same youth energy could be the right one. Maybe they think like that. We can say that, because as we see the recent updates from the Bangladesh, also the new one of the certain peoples could not give the best result as they assumed before the election. But in the context of Nepal, we are optimistic about the issues, because that's not a completely a new party, or not only the Gen Z party. Maybe the result could be different to the other parties also, like not only in the favor of these Rashtriya Swatantra Party. It could be also the for Nepali Congress also, and for other also. But the mandate should be coming from the people, coming from the public. And the main reason behind this is this election is bringing the current mandate from the public. So we are hopeful that the young groups and the youth people who are engaged in the politics could have a bigger impact, like inside the Nepali Congress, inside the Nepal Rashtriya Swatantra Party, or CPN UML, or maybe the Nepali Communist Party, Rashtriya Prajatantrik Party. These are the parties. So maybe the other also. So we hope that youths who are into all these parties could bring the impact in their parties. And besides, also there are some people who are in the Gen Z movement, but not still not into the political parties. They are not joining the political parties. May they also continue to ask the government and make the government accountable, and we are hopeful for that. Thank you.
Great. So you think participating in the already existing political outfits is the way to go for Nepal? That's interesting in the context of what Dr. Rana said. Unless Dr. Rana wants to come in here, I'd like to move on to the next question because we are kind of
I'd like
running.
to
Yeah, please go ahead,
ask
Dr. Rana.
something. Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of exercises were being worked on for coalition building. Kulman Gising, former minister, was, was in a place where he was negotiating as a person to be involved as a senior leader in RSP. But then later on, for due to various circumstances, he actually has registered a new party called Ujalo Nepal Party, and it was gaining a lot of momentum until they merged with RSP briefly, and then their proportional representation, the representative list was consolidated with RSP, and then something didn't work out, and now Ujalo Nepal is fighting on its own. But because they don't have the proportional representative, the power, the momentum has kind of, subsided. There have been a few initiatives, like a Gen Z front has been established. They are more like a watchdog, and some have been favoring one party versus some of them have been favoring the other. But the good thing about the youth engagement is during the entire process, we have seen the young advocates, especially women advocates, doing a phenomenal job of holding the government and its cabinet accountable, providing directions towards magnifying the voter registration process. People like Raksha, people like Bhavana, people like Tanuja, these are some of the iron ladies, I would say, of our times. They've been doing a phenomenal job, and I think it is better for these watchdogs to be outside of politics and doing the job, because it doesn't work if everybody wants to try their hands into politics. There has to be people. We have to have people outside, as watchdogs. So yes, that is one optimistic thing, a very optimistic thing about youth engagement. They wanted that peaceful revolution. It didn't turn out as expected, but then that front has been continuously doing its job of advocacy, of accountability, of transparency. They have held different parties accountable. They were involved in the political parties changing their decisions of candidates. Because when something was not done correctly and not transparently, they have held political parties accountable very recently. So I see that as a very positive sign of, how these watchdogs role might play out to be. I want to see this going much bigger than how they have worked right now. And at this point, these individuals are really working individually. There has been a little bit of an organization within themselves, but if this organization grows, if their collaboration and cooperation grows, I think they'll play a very good role in holding the government accountable in the days to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought the question of, or rather, the participation of women and their leadership, even if we don't pay attention to this, in electoral processes in South Asia, very dominated by men. I noticed how in the case of Jamaat-e-Islami in Bangladesh, it was the women who basically led or were responsible for the grassroots mobilization for the organization. And eventually they were betrayed in the matter of representation in the Bangladeshi parliament. But I wanted to turn to Sumikshya, because I have a question for you here. There's a question from an Indian Gen Z to a Nepali Gen Z. And the question is something to this effect. I'm paraphrasing the question. How do you see Nepal setting an example, especially in the case of gender representation in elections for South Asia, especially in India, especially in comparison to India? Something like this, yeah. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. That would be great.
Okay, so basically the question is, how do you see Nepal setting an example, especially in terms of gender representation in parliaments and in electoral processes, especially in comparison with India?
Okay. Yeah, as I talked about it earlier, the representations and meaningful participation, not just tokenistic participation, is like a fruit hanging in the sky. So we still have a lot to achieve before we reach that. And even in the areas where we have ensured female leadership through representations and elections, there is this proxy representations where the women are elected. It's the men who are running the position instead of the women. So we can see that especially in the local government, and I know the case is similar in the cases of India or Sri Lanka as well. So I can say it is a bit tricky to get that. And even if we look at the 11% of representations in the elections right now, and the 48% of the voter representations that we talked about, even for those leaders who are already in the forefront, the climate for women leadership has become increasingly toxic, mostly because of the wider access to social media as well. So today, the public scrutiny is less about women's capabilities and more about the biological status, as it has always been. And we see it especially in the case of a pregnant candidate who is from Kathmandu, so who was constantly interrogated on her future commitment as she was becoming a mother. So as if the voters, they have thought that the motherhood and leaderships are mutually exclusive, which is not. And the men who are becoming fathers, they never have to answer these questions. And we have the first female prime minister. So we had the first female president all long ago. So even the first female prime minister was not spared from the criticism. Her age was weaponized against her in a way that is never applied to a men in her circles, men of her age. And we've seen older men leaders in Nepal. So I guess we still have a lot of work to do. We have to close the gap that exists between the principles and the practices. So women are underrepresented on voter rolls, and there is less representation in direct electoral candidacies as well. But we understand that democracy cannot be resilient, it cannot be fulfilled without having women's participations. And for this, we have to continue working in the women's empowerment, especially at the local level. And we have established that economic empowerment is directly relevant to the political empowerment that we aspire for. So women's economic empowerment, agency building, and overall capacity building, and dismantling the toxic patriarchal system that is so well established in country and in India with similar background. It's very essential. I hope I have answered the question.
Yes, very comprehensively. We're kind of running short on time, so thank you, Sumikshya. Thank you, all the panelists. We did have a question from the panel, from the chat box. Lovely conversation. I was wondering if there has been any change in the way election campaigning has taken place this time, Also, how relevant has been India in this campaign? So this is a question from the audience, and I solicit any of you to take up this question.
I can pitch in a little, maybe.
Sorry, say that again, Dr. Rana.
So I can pitch in some.
Yes, please, please.
So massive use and abuse both of social media in the campaign. The campaign nature has shifted due to the nature of the current elections. They were anticipating a lot of mishaps in the process, but the government has done a good job of bringing all the parties together and creating a consensus that the military can also be engaged in the outer circles of electoral security. You can see Nepali army making their rounds from early in the morning to late in the night. So it's a 24/7 thing. So seeing that, seeing the military presence has given Nepali public a sense of security. And I think this time around, the political parties have followed the electoral guidelines, to a larger extent, because the election commission has become very strict, and we have seen a decent amount of change in electoral costs as well to the open eye, because um, the period the period was defined, the logistics were defined, and it was just surprising to see that not too many violations were going on. So the campaign was surprisingly decent this time around, compared to the past, and more so it was digitally guided. Most of the candidates and most of the political parties have used social media and the digital platforms for the major campaigns. I guess the timeline was also a major factor here, and I don't think we got entertained by the Indian rumors so much this time. Yeah, not so much. Not too many
I'm sorry,
movements.
I'm disappointed to hear that.
Yeah, not too many movements from either side. Going here or there for political discussions, I guess. And I think the internal democracy and party reformation practices that all happened within the last 2 months or so, everybody was just focused on their internal matters rather than the regional matters or, regional endorsement, per se. So I think these factors have played a big role in the nature of campaigning for the political parties.
Sorry, it was great listening to you. Nabin, do you want to add something to this? Nabin and Sumiksha, both of you.
Okay, so I could not catch the question. So I guess we're talking about social media and the political campaigning from what Dr. Rana said. So adding to what...
Yeah, the changes in election campaigning, and Dr. Rana talked about how the influence of social media has really become very prominent in this election.
Yeah, so digital platforms, they have become a tool and a battleground for the warfare, narrative warfare between various political parties. And so we hear of cyber senas, who are these organized online supporter groups, and they're playing massive role in the election campaign as well. So when we talk about gender and voting, we can say that the online election campaigns, they have provided more information to the women easily. The access to information has become more easier easier, that because of which now women do not have to rely on their male counterparts to access information on what's happening, on the updates, and who is in what candidacy. So it has become a good aspect from that side, and it has helped amplify the party messages. But it has also become a space where the political parties attack each other, and then say wrong narratives that become trending, and then establish false narratives in the community. So as Dr. Rana said, it has been both use and misuse of social media. Thank you. Over to you.
So adding into these issues, like social media is being the crucial part of the election, and it is the new new weapon to the election also. And people are using it in a right way also, in a wrong way also. There are many issues, and I want to talk about two of the social media things, like Tekpana. In Nepal, Tekpana is doing like the fact check. Other also doing that, but Tekpana is doing the fact check. People are easily people are giving the allegations to the people because it's the time of election. So Tekpana is doing a great job by checking the fact and making people aware about the fact, is that okay or not, it is right thing or wrong thing, uh, the information is true or false. It is doing like that. So another one is Speak Up Nepal. Speak Up Nepal in Nepal is making people aware about the issues, like what are the people we are voting, what are the manifestos they are preparing. They are giving us the information, and they are also making us aware about what is the type of election we are having, and what is the condition we should be aware of. So these are the social medias and the platform which are making people aware also. And social media is being the great platform, and the content creators, already Sumiksha already mentioned about the cyber senas and things. And we are now seeing every parties have their own content creators, and everyone is provoking their agendas in the content creation also. So social media is being the new and the next platform where they are creating the awareness and making the people aware about the agendas and the issues. So now it's already the day after tomorrow it's elections, and already Maun Avadi is already started. So people are not posting about that. If many are posting, election commission is taking the charge. So that's the thing, how social media is taking the this election is into the new next level. Thank you.
Great. So social media it remains to be seen how far-reaching effect social media would have in terms of influencing the specific outcomes of elections. But it does seem to me that across South Asia, social media has come to play a very, very strong role in influencing the processes of elections, vigilance, oversights, and things like that. So thank you for raising our attention to these very diverse aspects of social media. In the case of Nepal, we're kind of running towards the end of the program. Are there any questions in the chat box for us to take up? Let me quickly review. Okay, so I think we are about time to conclude the program. So I did want to thank all the panelists. Dr. Pranaya Rana, Ishika was not here, she had to leave early. Unfortunately, Nabin, Sumiksha, for agreeing to do this on such a short notice. This is a very, very special conversation. The elections are upcoming on March 5th, and as Dr. Pranaya Rana noted, it's a time for no matter what stance we have personally, it's time for us to think about each one of us as informed participants in this process of democracy. I'd also like to thank our audience for this engaged participation, and thank you to my team for helping me put this together. I hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation, to this discussion. Please tune in at revdem.ceu.edu for more such topical discussions. Thank you, all the panelists again, and stay safe.
Thank you so much, Anushree. Thank you for having us. It was great hearing from Dr. Pranaya Rana, Sumiksha, and Ishika also. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you, dear
Namaste.
participants, all panelists. It would be lovely to meet you all in person someday.
Sure, Dr.
Mhm.
Rana will be meet.
Yes,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Let's
I'm
let's
glad to.
let's continue
And
the conversation in our
we
email
have already
chain.
met when you are at the Ministry of Youth also. Thank you. We'll see you.
Thank
Awesome,
you for.
awesome. We'll look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to see you. Hope for the best. Thank you.
Bye.